Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. I'm Amanda Sollman, and along with Mark Jewell, your host for this show and the creator of the Surviving to Thriving movement. Each week, we'll dive into the mindsets that keep us in survival mode and learn how to get on the path to a truly thriving life. If you're looking for a wake-up call and want some valuable tools to get there, you have come to the right place. After all, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. Now, let's head over to the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. This is your host and founder of the Surviving to Thriving movement, Mark Jewell, along with my lovely assistant, Miss Amanda Sollman, over in Michigan, sporting the Thrive Today shirt today. Not that you could see this if you're listening to the podcast while you're driving.
Marketing.
However, if you were hanging out with us on the live broadcast, then you can definitely see what Amanda's got going on, and some very, very stylish Beats by Dre I can see from your side. So love it.
I got them just because they look cool. Let's be real.
Exactly. It's all about the show, right? So cool. So Amanda, today we're diving into part 2. This is a follow-up to our last week's podcast, which was about how to motivate employees, where we dove into some of those myths that people get into. And I think we hopefully defunked some of those things.
Hopefully.
Today we're going to get a little bit more maybe pragmatic, practical. I don't know, there's a P word in there that I think could fit, and maybe let's put some rubber to the road. How about that? I like analogies.
Yeah. So this week, I guess where we're coming at from this week is that so many times, and it's not just about motivation, it's about a lot of different things. We get people coming to us saying, how do I fix it? You know, how do I get myself to be more motivated? How do I make other people act the way I want them to? How do I get my customers to buy more stuff, right? It's how. And the challenge is so often we don't stop and think why somebody's not doing something the way we want in the first place, right? So we don't stop and say, well, why isn't our customer buying our product? Or why isn't that person acting the way I wanted? Or in the context of today's conversation, why am I not motivated, or why are my employees not motivated? So today we're going to jump into basically 7 big buckets that might be causing someone to lack motivation in the first place, right? We talked last week that one of the big myths is that you can't just go get motivation somewhere. So there's a root cause going on there. There's a root cause as to why you're not motivated. And if we don't understand that root cause, the how doesn't matter at all. So that's where we're going today, Mark.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. So, guys, just so you know, if you're looking for an additional resource to maybe actually read, if you're somebody who likes to take things in through the visual task of actually reading a thing, you can hop on over to markjeweltraining.com and opt in. I know, Amanda, you can probably point them in a direction better than I can, but we're basing this content off of an ebook that Amanda put together for us. And so we actually have a lot of this in written format, at least if you want something to follow along with. So when you're done with this, pop on over to markjeweltraining.com and we can get you hooked up with an actual PDF of this sent out to you via email pretty easily. So there's more to this, and Amanda and I are obviously going to talk loosely through it here this afternoon as well. So
yep, absolutely.
Talk to me about clarity. What is
all
going
right
on here? So I know that I say that motivation doesn't exist. And I'm pretty sure I said that last week too.
And we'll probably say it again many times from here.
Probably say it just about every time I get a microphone in my hand or get an audience to listen to me. And guys, this is huge if you really understand. So how can I motivate people, et cetera, et cetera? What we basically say is motivation isn't a thing. It's not a physical thing that you can give somebody. It's literally even, cracking the whip only gets somebody to move one step forward. It's not about that. When somebody's not motivated, what we're lacking is clarity. Okay. So motivation is what you feel. It's a feeling internally when you know what it is that you're creating, when you're clear about what it is that you're creating. And so if you, your people, your customer, et cetera, whoever it is around you, if they are lacking motivation, it has simply come from a lack of clarity. In other words, I forgot what I set out to create. I've forgotten. I'm no longer clear on what I've set out to do.
Mhm.
Amanda, how does that show up for you?
Yeah, so I want to take this from a couple of angles. One, if you are a manager of people, and Mark's been there, I've been there, like we've managed folks before. It can be really easy to think that the directions you've given are clear, right? Because they make sense in our head. And in a lot of cases, especially with our most experienced folks, you've got 10, 15, 20 years of experience filling in the gaps. So even if the words don't come out of your mouth, you're like, oh, sure, I know what my employee is supposed to do, right? Because you just inherently understand it. So one of the things around clarity that I really want to make clear is like, if you are a manager, be careful about not giving clear enough direction or not setting clear enough expectations.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I think we can be like, oh yeah, I told him that he needs to increase the number of cold calls he's making. What does that mean? Is that like you need to call on 5 more people a week, 10 more people a week, 20? Like, what does that mean? Or, I told them that they needed to have that project done next week. Is that Wednesday? Is that Friday? Like, make sure that when you're giving direction and you're setting expectations that you're super clear, because what often happens, and Mark, you can speak to this too, especially with some of our young professionals. Number one, it will hurt their confidence a little bit when we'll do that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next point. But
Mm-hmm.
when they aren't sure what they're supposed to be doing, they will take it personally and think that they're doing something wrong when
Sure.
maybe the direction wasn't super clear on the front side.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is people will fill in the blanks, and then you as the manager will not be happy with what you get because it wasn't what you had in your head, right? So you said if the project was due next week and you meant Wednesday, they
Yeah.
assume Friday. Now both people are upset, right?
Yeah.
So I think from a management standpoint, it's really important to make sure that you are helping your employees get clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the just the number one areas. If you as a leader can take a step and slow down, like let's just pause here for a second and really think through, like set up a mental trigger or some sort of other um, way to remember that when we're giving direction, okay, number one, we need to stop assuming that somebody is going to know how to do it. Okay, this is where I see, and I'll just be honest, I see a lot of unenlightened leaders, especially in maybe some of the more technical tasks, or if it's something that you've been doing or they've been doing for 30 years, we make the assumption that, that this person automatically kind of knows how to do it, and maybe even at the level that you know how to do it, right? And so that's when we stop considering that we even that we need to be more specific in our direction giving, if you will. So that's one space where I see a lot of people missing the boat on clarity is we're making an assumption about the level of skill with which somebody knows how to do something. And then let's just take your young employees, your new employees, folks that are fresh off the boat. We say, okay, here are the expectations. The very clear expectations are that you're talking to at least 15 new prospects every single week. Right? Okay, so great. That is very clear. Thank you for the clear, measurable summation of my expectations over the course of the next week. Now, understand at the same time, I, as a young person, you just told me I got to talk to 15 people I don't know about, that I've never met, that, and by the way, this isn't just going out to talk to people. I lack certainty. I lack confidence. I feel like I don't know enough. I don't know enough about the products yet, right? There's all these other things that start to sort of fall into, and I think this will probably play into some of the other points along the way, Amanda, right? But you need to consider for a second that there are some other things, right? So you can even get to more levels, deeper levels of clarity with me. So if this is a new person and we say, we want you to talk to 15 new people this week, but we might also say like, hey, don't break yourself up over not selling something right off the bat. There's some, not every call is going to turn into a sale. We just want you to get comfortable going out and talking with people. And here's what I would do is just go one step closer, is like, hey, let's be honest. Like, we've all been there. I was new in this role once too, or something like this. It can be kind of intimidating and maybe even a little bit scary to go call on some people. And I feel you. Like, I totally understand what that is. So now I'm actually bringing myself down to a level, and I want to create to the same level, where that person's at, trying to relate at a deeper level. And then say, what would you say your level of confidence or certainty is to be able to go out and have these conversations, and no right or wrong answers. And if you tell me a 10, I know you're going to be lying to me. Right. Like, right. And maybe it's a 2, maybe it's a 1, like maybe it's, it's probably really is a 2 or a 1, and they'll probably tell you 5. And so, okay. So, what would it look like? How would it feel if you were an 8? Mm-hmm. Right. And so now I want to help that person start to put this into their words. It doesn't matter if that answer is right or wrong. Don't get on your high and mighty horse about whether you think they're right or wrong. To them, what does it look like if it were a 7, an 8, a 9? What would that feel like in their terms, right? When humans do everything based on feeling, okay? Intellect and like logic is a very small part of the equation. And so, so what are we feeling on? And so when we go back to review the week, okay, and just kind of see how it went, we want to be conversing not just on the numbers. Did they get 15? Yes, that's part of the equation. There's a lot of different things that could come up, right? I mean, they might have gotten in on 3 or 4 of those calls and kind of got their ass handed to them. And now they might be circling the section 5 or 6 times before they finally drive up a driveway, or they might be, stalling a little bit in the car, having to jam out to some AC/DC before they've got the courage to go walk in and talk to that customer. So, just understand there's a lot of different things going on. And so from a clarity standpoint, we need to define not just the numbers, but like getting clear on like, what are your real expectations for achievement with those numbers? I see a lot of managers kind of honestly are hoping that person's going to get lucky and knock it out of the park for you right away. And just understand that's about you. That is not about them. And so you need to be willing to take a little bit of extra time and invest in that person and help them get clear on what are they really creating and what are we really expecting from the experience this week. And be clear. And by the way, what I'm seeing a lot of managers not do is take the time to get clear themselves on what that looks like, so that you don't actually know what you're expecting to get out of those people. And, one of the biggest things, and I guess whatever, I'll put myself on a pedestal here for a minute. One of the biggest things that I'm focused on right now is not on how can Mark, go out and create more leads for the company right now. Like, I want to do that. This is part of how we do that. How can Mark, become the best speaker in the company or anything like that. That's not where I'm at right now. As I try to level up our team and go from Mark Jewell speaking and training 1.0, which was Mark doing all the speaking and training, to MJST on a global level. That means that I need to invest time in Amanda to help Amanda become the best version of her, whatever that looks like. Right? To help Wade become the best version of him, to help John, to help Christina, to help Todd, to help all of our team level up into the next best version of them. That's my job now. Right. And so we're, consistently having conversations, trying to do more things with each other to level up, get everybody more experience. And what we're clearly creating from that is a company where I become less and less irrelevant in the day-to-day. Right. And more relevant in the leading and visioning and all that good stuff. So to me, that's what leadership is. And that's how we're, creating more motivation at the end of the day to come back to what is each individual on my team clearly creating for themselves right now, and how is that contributing to something larger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that's really good coming from the manager's perspective. But I do want to step back and put in a caveat here, because when beating up on managers, make sure your people are clear on what and how they should be doing things. Yeah. But let's be real. As employees, we're not off the hook for getting clarity. Now, on the flip side, right? Like, it's really hard to be motivated if I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to be doing. Right. But the reality is I can't wait for someone to tell me what I should be doing. Now, on one hand, right, you don't know what you don't know. So I may not even know the right questions to ask. And that's where a good manager, a good leader can step in and really help create that sense of clarity. But I'm not off the hook when it comes to getting that clarity for myself as well. So I do want to do a plug. If you have not listened to the podcast episode from a couple weeks ago on setting and managing expectations, you'll probably hear some similar themes from me here as we talk about motivation and clarity. But the reality is, if you don't feel clear about what you're creating, if you don't know what your goals are, right? We get a lot of people who come into our training programs who, when we ask them, what are your company or what are your business goals for the next 90 days, who give us a blank stare. They're like, I don't know, right? And they haven't asked either. Like, you can ask your boss what your goals are or what they expect, or you can create your own.
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the, oh my gosh, and people quickly pick up on this, like when they work with us, they go through our coaching programs, and we just don't tolerate the BS excuse that you don't have a goal, or your boss. My favorite one is, my boss didn't give me a goal. This, like, literally with one of my very first coaching clients several years ago. We're going back like 4 years ago now. We got into the coaching program after the live event, and we said, okay, what are the goals that you have for sales, within your company? And this is in October, which is, like, at that point for this company, 4 months into their fiscal year. Okay. And you're like, well, I don't know, but our VP didn't give us any goals yet. Oh my God. Like, okay, cool. So I understand, are you just waiting? Is this what you do? Is you sit around and you collect a paycheck until somebody gives you, like, something to shoot for? And Amanda, unfortunately, across, like, a lot of corporate America, the answer to that question is yes. Like, a lot of you are sitting out there waiting for somebody else to help you be driven, right? Like, you will not last long in a company like MJST if that is your program, right? You'll either level up or you'll level out. It's one of those two things, right? And so that's what I see in a lot of places. And you're 100% right. Like, yes, we put a lot of intent on the managers, a lot of weight on the shoulders of a leader or manager in a company to provide that clarity. But let's be honest, like, at the end of the day, like, we're all only human, and most leaders are learning as they go anyway. The only reason that in most cases, actually, that leader became that leader because they were good at the job you used to do, which does not make them, by the way, qualified to manage or lead. And so now they got to go figure out how to do all that shit, plus everything else that you're doing, and help you, right, do your job. So just understand and give your leaders the benefit of the doubt. They're still learning and growing in most cases. So what do you get to do? You get to get clear. Just if nothing else, ask better questions, right? This is something between you and John and Wade, these are some of the things that you guys do really well, because Lord knows that sometimes I lack skills in creating clarity for the team. So everybody's asking more questions and trying to get clear. I love that. But that comes from everybody kind of owning up and wanting, to be a part of this. So I love that. Get some clarity, guys.
And there's no stupid, there can be stupid questions, I guess, but, like, literally you and I were emailing last week when you were at an event, and you're like, can you email these people something? And I was like, what do you want me to email them? Right. So, like, if you don't know, just send any message, just, like, say hi, whatever. You're like, okay. So, like, if you get direction and it's not clear, you need to ask. And, like, to be real honest, like, if it's one thing if you don't know what you don't know. If it's one thing if you don't realize that you're missing a piece of the puzzle. But if you're sitting there going, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing, the only one who is responsible for fixing that is you. And if you're not asking the questions, you're the only one who can control that. So I want to make sure we keep moving here. We're spending a lot of time on clarity because it is really important. But I think the moral of the story on, if you don't feel motivated because you don't know what the heck you're supposed to be doing, ask more questions. And the same thing goes to the manager's side. If you want to figure out if your employee's lacking clarity, ask them questions. So there needs to be more conversation going on.
Absolutely. So just to tag onto that, and then this will, I believe, help us parlay into point number 2. Why don't we ask questions sometimes? What's the reason? What's the rationale? It almost seems irrational that we don't ask questions. And I believe it kind of ties back to this. A lot of what created us is, happened, in our childhood upbringing, when we were very, very small. And a lot of us, I'd say the vast majority of people, were raised with this idea that you're supposed to have it all figured out and you should know, like you should just know. Right. And so when I don't know, right, I have this fear about being the person who didn't know. And so I get stuck in this internal perception of what I think others will think of me, which basically means I don't know. I lack certainty, because I feel like I should know, but I don't know. I don't want to be the employee that didn't know. Just know that it's okay not to know. That's one of the basic rules that we operate on. Is like, hey, it's cool. It's okay to screw things up once in a while. The worst case scenario, you ask a stupid question. Like, what's the downside of that? Right? There really is none. There really is none. So that kind of plays into our next one, which is around certainty.
Yeah. So I think certainty and by extension, confidence come into play where motivation is involved. So on one hand, to your point, there's certainty as it relates to getting clarity, right? There's feeling confident in asking questions when you don't know the answer. I think that's a really important piece of it. Mm-hmm. The other piece that I think can sometimes happen is that you've gotten really clear expectations. You know what you're supposed to be doing. You know how you're supposed to be doing it, but you just don't have the certainty in your abilities or your knowledge or your skills or your experience that you're like, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not capable of doing it. I don't feel confident in doing it. And so therefore I'm not motivated to do it, right? This is the classic drive up a driveway, make a cold call situation. It's like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to drive up that driveway. Mark gave me his awesome scripts. I know how I'm supposed to talk to my customer. I've been through trainings that have told me how to set this up and what I should be accomplishing, but like I'm so scared that I just literally don't think I'm capable of it. And it's really hard to do that. So I think that's a piece that especially if you're a manager and you're not getting results from your folks and your first instinct is say, well, they're not motivated to make cold calls. This is the place where I would be going first, because this is usually the really scary part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And just so we're clear, the scripts that I give them are awesome and they work really, really well. But that doesn't mean that you believe it, right? So we teach, that I'll just take it back to our sales training. So when we do sales training, we teach our sales scripts and they work. We've tested them. Like we've had clients test them. I use them. Wade uses them. We know that they work. It's not about knowing whether or not something will work. It's about believing, can I do it? Right? Mm-hmm. Do I believe in my ability to execute on that skill, that task, that thing in order to make something happen? And that's where, to your point, a lot of people lack the motivation to do something because I can't predict with 100% accuracy the outcome in my favor. Mm-hmm. Right? And so there's really no easy answer to this, right? As there isn't any of this for that matter. But I'll be honest, like this one really comes from a lot taking swings, right? It's literally stepping up to the plate and taking some at bats, understanding that you're going to strike out once in a while. And so that's from the employee perspective. Like, just know, like, if it's a sales role, you're going to strike out probably at least 7 out of 10 times over your lifetime of your career. And you might, if you were really good, if you were like the best in the business, you might get on base 5 out of 10 times, maybe. Right. And that's just getting into it. That's not even closing the deal. To put it in the context of other things, in the workplace, like you just get to try things on. It's like breaking in a new pair of shoes. It's like breaking in a new pair of boots, or, developing a new friendship or a new relationship, right? It feels awkward at first. You don't know much about the other person. And what happens is the more you have coffee together, and the more you have beers together, the more you hang out or just run into each other at random times or whatever, the more comfortable the relationship gets. Any new skill set, any new thing that you get to take on at work is going to be the same way. From the manager side, I just want to throw something in. I'll shut up, Amanda. From the manager side is Just again, what kind of boss are you when somebody takes a swing and doesn't get on base right away? What kind of boss are you? What kind of leader are you when somebody tries something and they screw up, right? What is my initial, what expectations are you setting with your people in that initial time when I go out there and I screw up just a little bit, right? If you're putting me in a high stakes situation right off the bat and I don't succeed, cool. Just how are you responding to me? Because that's going to have a huge impact in how much I'm willing to try to continue getting better at that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the bat.
That was exactly where I was going. When I think of this from a manager standpoint, I had an experience in a previous role where I was working on a client project, and from my end, I had done pretty much everything that I could have done to make sure that this project went well. But, like in most situations, there's other people, other, partner businesses involved. And something happened somewhere else in the line that I didn't have direct control over. But what it meant was I needed to have the conversation with the client to let them know that somewhere along the line, something got messed up. Okay. And I remember wanting to avoid that conversation like the plague. It was something that had happened in like I worked in advertising. So it was the folding of like this direct mail piece, that it wasn't folded right when it went out. And, because it had like some fancy folding. But in any case, I was like, I want to avoid it. Maybe the sample we got at the ad agency, maybe that was the only one that was folded wrong. Maybe I don't have to have this really scary conversation because maybe it was just that one out of thousands that was wrong, right?
Yeah.
And my boss looked at me and said, it doesn't matter. Said, even if yours is the one wrong one out of thousands, you don't know that, and therefore you need to have a client with the conversation because you don't want them to find out from somebody else that something happened.
Yeah.
But what happened is she sat with me in the room while I had the conversation. She made me lead the conversation, but she sat there with me.
That's cool.
And so, from a certainty, from a confidence standpoint, one, I got to practice that conversation because the reality is in client-based and customer-based industries, you're going to have tough conversations. Yeah. But she let me learn how to have that conversation in somewhat of a safe space. And so I think from a manager standpoint, when it comes to building certainty and confidence in your people, you can push people to do hard things. And yes, that might mean they make mistakes, but you can do it in a place that fosters learning out of that experience.
Right. That's awesome. That is the perfect example of something like that. And I mean, just literally sitting through that sort of scary scenario with somebody who's new, because eventually, I mean, you'll get to lead your employee through that scary conversation, and guide them through, which is part of what we do, here lately as we've been leveling up, adding more coaches, right? We've been, it started with me working with you guys now working with our contract coaches and bringing them up to speed. It's perfect. It's the perfect scenario.
Sometimes in order to build that certainty, right? Because earlier you said, if you don't feel confident, you've just got to take swings. You got to go up to to whatever swing. I'm not a baseball person, whatever. But from a manager standpoint, like you can somewhat force that situation. You can force them to do things that they don't want to do on their own because it's best for them in the long run, right? We have to be careful of wanting to save people from doing things that they're not comfortable with and instead really push them through that growth experience.
Right. Now, I will say this. I've seen the dark side of leadership, which is, I'm afraid that Amanda can't go in and have that conversation right. And a huge part of our billing is related to that client. Yes. So I'm going to go fix it for her, which does jack to help that employee develop over time. So that is a huge watch out. We run into a lot of leaders, and I know some of you are listening, so sorry, I'm calling you out. Actually, I'm not sorry. But the reality is a lot of you who we talk to are so afraid of letting go of the reins because you're afraid it'll create more work for you. And so when you do that, just know this, you're signing up for a lifetime of more work then you have to do, because you're not empowering the people around you.
Yep.
Period.
Absolutely.
Period. End of
Absolutely.
story on that one.
Cool.
One little thing, and this is just, related to, going with them to help them through that first, that first little bit. Like when I was a kid, I would go the first 2 years that I hunted, I had to sit in the deer stand with my dad. I think that was actually a law, right? But that was part of passing the baton. Like you were learning from that, from an experienced, person in that field. So that's, same kind of thing, but also just look at like, how can you potentially set up, I use a stair step pattern, right? Just think about gamifying, somebody. You're going to train them into different, through different levels of achievement. So just think about how you can provide somebody a simple task at the beginning. And then you create increasingly difficult opportunities or tasks for somebody to go through, so they literally don't even realize that they're building confidence over time. And you can do that with any job, any scenario. We can do a whole nother podcast just on how to gamify, a job. In fact, I'm pretty sure we have done one somewhere. So that's out there. All right. So what, Amanda, what's up next?
Awesome. So just, I think that clarity and certainty like makes up the vast majority of why people are not super motivated, to be real honest. So if you can like make some progress, either for yourself or for other folks, on those two aspects, you're going to make up a lot of ground. Then I think it gets into some more specific examples. One of the things that I think blocks people from being motivated to do something is when they don't believe that they have any control over the outcome. Right.
Yeah.
So like they might have all the clarity in the world. They might know what they're supposed to do. They might actually believe that they are capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't believe that it's going to do any good, they're not going to be motivated to do it. We keep coming back to sales examples because we work with a lot of sales folks. But I've heard this from folks who are kind of in the sales world who, yes, like I know I know the conversation I'm supposed to have. I know, I know how to do it, right? I have the confidence, but because of the markets or because of some other extenuating circumstances, they're like, dude's not going to buy from me anyway, so why bother talking to him? Right.
Yeah.
And so there are situations like that where it's like, I'm not motivated because like, I don't feel like my work will make any difference.
Right. Yeah. So here, I'll take this just out of a sales context, maybe even completely out of the business context altogether, and go personal with this one. So, let's just take a relationship as an example: spouse relationship, personal relationship, child. I have a dog right now who's 4 months old as a puppy. I can't get that flipping puppy to take a crap outside. I mean, that's like that's literally what's going on. Like my dog training skills from 14 years ago when I had my last puppy have completely gone away, or there's something wrong with this dog. It's one of those two things. And so I find myself actually, and this is probably the one of the worst examples. Like if you're on Facebook, give me some of those like laughy things right now, because seriously, but that's the scenario. Like I've found myself like, okay, like he does number one outside, no problem. Doesn't miss a beat, no problem at all. He literally will come back in the house after doing that and go in the parlor for number two. And so, my belief in this dog is like, this guy literally like, and now it's become like when it gets warm out and I put the fence in, like then he'll figure out how to use the doggy door and go do his thing outside. Like that's it. Now there are other things I can train him to do, put on a bell system, but it just became like, seriously, like that is, that's the thing. But let's take a relationship. Maybe you've been in a multi-year relationship. Vanessa and I are coming up on our 12-year anniversary in April. And, I know there have been times in the relationship where it's been, where things have gotten like a little rough, a little rocky, it hasn't always been sunshine and roses. And you get sold on this idea that no matter what you do to try and help that person be happy or give you more affection or like you more or respect you more or whatever it is that you're after in the relationship, but that person's not going to change. Right? We get sold on the idea that they're going to be that way forever. And that becomes the same if it's a sales situation and it's your client and they don't call you back, they don't return your emails, they always, seem to be missing when you show up at their door or whatever. We start to think, well, they're just never going to buy from me. right? That person's never going to change. They're never going to accept my ideas. And so it's very, very easy to get demotivated, right? Which means I'm starting to lack clarity about what I want out of that situation. And so what happens now is we start to tell negative stories. We say, well, that, person's whatever word you want to insert there. They're just a jerk. They're just, they're sold on something else. They're too good for me, right? We get stuck in that story. So that is how that scenario. So it doesn't mean that you don't know how. It doesn't even know that you don't know what to do. It doesn't mean that you believe in your ability to be a good person or worthy of that relationship, but we get stuck in a story that says they're never going to change.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I disrupt that story? It's a deep one.
Yeah,
right?
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Because the other example that comes to my mind on this one, and I've heard it both in the corporate space and even in non-corporate space, but still kind of a businessy space, is this idea. So like a lot of people who maybe head up departments or things like that, like have to submit budgets and to try and get the higher ups to give them money for the year. And if year after year, like they submit the budgets and they just never get the money they need over and over and over and over and never get the money they need. Like people stop thinking of new things to do. They stop looking for new ways to push the business forward because they're like, they cut my budget every year anyway. So why, it's out of my control. Again, it's out of my control. I can't get this to happen. And so when I've talked with folks in the past, and I mean, you can kind of speak to this on the personal side and the example you gave is like, how can you do something different than how you've always done it?
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, with the talking to the customer who you think is just never going to buy anyway, is there a new way to come in? Or can you bring him lunch instead of just driving up the driveway? If they always turn your budget down, can you actually like present your budget in person and set up a meeting to walk through why you want that money? Or, there's all sorts of different ways you can come at it. But the first is realizing that it's not actually out of your control. Right. The first step is realizing I'm in a story, because if you don't realize you're in a story, you can't change it. So I think that's kind of how I've dealt with this one in the past with some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, and this is what we teach our clients too, is there's always, when we're trying to disrupt the negative pattern of thought or the negative story that I have going on about a person, a thing, a situation, whatever. Number one is I try to take a different action. And you mentioned some really, really good ones there. Like, I mean, most often there's another way in. If it's a sales situation, there's a referral scenario that we could try. Who else could we know? Who else could I network that could eventually introduce me to this person and help me develop a relationship? Maybe I'm not below Facebook stalking, and I'll find out when their birthday is, and I will send them a text message if I've got their number on their birthday, and they're like, who the heck is this? And it doesn't matter, because all I'm trying to do is disrupt their pattern and show them that I'm more about than just selling them a product. So that's one of those things. We look for different actions. If it's a relationship, like your personal relationship, there are different things you can take. Like, you don't need to be above counseling, as an example. Like, get some outside help, see a relationship, or go on a retreat together, take a vacation, do something that you'd never done. Hey guys, take her on a date, buy her some flowers, just see what happens, because you haven't done that in 10 years. And you might just give it a shot and see how things start to evolve. You might get what you're looking for. So that's one thing that I would, so there's different actions, right? So what can I do? And then the thought becomes, and this is maybe the most appropriate way, is like, if I'm stuck in a story about what's going on with this person, this situation, whatever, come back to our reading and the training that we've done through Byron Katie, is just asking yourself the question, like, if the story is, this is never going to change, this person's never going to evolve, they're never going to get better, this employee is never going to be motivated again, they just, you've put them in a box. Right. And I see a lot of managers putting their people, they've got a 9-box system. They've got a 4-box system. So when they're 9-boxing, right, they're going to take their bottom box and say, okay, these people are never going to change. So let's get them out of here. That very well may be true. I'm not opposed to good management strategies and things that work, especially in larger organizations. However, it's when we get stuck in a story, sometimes we haven't considered whether or not, is it true And how can I know with beyond a shadow of a doubt, is it absolutely true that this person is never going to change, grow, shift, etc.? Right? Is it true? And if I can't prove that it's true, that this person is never going to shift or change or grow or get better, then from my perspective, and this is how I operate, is I am not allowed to give up on that person yet. Right now, I mean, if it's a company situation and you get to make some changes and whatever, I mean, there are obviously if the policy is that people get to level up, I'm not putting this 100% on you as the leader. You as the person who feels like the story is never going to change at work are responsible for making this happen too. Don't get me wrong, but I can put it back into your context. So if my boss doesn't get me, right, my boss doesn't understand me. Well, you might be asking yourself is it true, right? Or do they just have like 15 other people that they manage plus a crap load of overhead paperwork because they have a boss that they report to too, right? Is it that they don't have time for you? Is that really true? Are you sure? Right? So now you start to consider well, maybe they have other shit going on in their life and that's preventing them from being more accessible to me. Well, how can I assist them in their journey? And I might even go to them with that question, say, hey, I'm really struggling. How can I assist you? Right. So that we're collectively working together.
Well, and on just to continue that train of thought, the other thing, especially when it comes to relationships with a boss or even relationships with other people, I think if you're married, you probably know people pretty well after a while, but what we find sometimes is when people are like, man, I can't connect with my boss. I can't, we just don't click. And it said, have you ever just like gone out to lunch or gone out to coffee and like just talked with them as like a person instead of just work all the time? Or like, I love it. We have one coaching client who's like, man, I'm having a hard time connecting with my boss. All I know is he likes sports. Like, I don't like sports, but I know he likes sports. And so like, that's one of his goals is to learn something about sports so he can actually have like a casual conversation with his boss. But that starts with, again, coming back to what can I do? What can I control? Stop worrying about them and start worrying about you and what you can control in the situation.
I love it.
Perfect.
I love it.
All right. So Mark, this next one is a big one in organizations specifically.
Yeah.
So we see folks, because we'll get complaints from managers, right? I tell my people that they have to do this thing, right? It's an organizational thing. It's been handed down from my boss, so I hand it down to them, and they just won't do it. I can't get them motivated to do it. I've tried punishing them. I've tried rewarding them, and they just don't do it. One of the big reasons that people aren't motivated to do certain things is because they don't really care about the outcome. You as their boss care about it way more than they do. Or you as the salesperson care about it way more than your customer does. And you wonder why they don't do what you ask them. It's because you're more invested than they are.
Right.
So I think this is a big one. Like, honestly, we work with a lot of, again, I keep saying, we work with a lot of salespeople. We work with a lot of salespeople who are required by the company to fill out their customer relationship management system, their CRM system, and they hate it. They hate it because they don't care about it. Because here's the rub: they don't see the value in it.
Right.
Same thing from a customer side. If you're more invested in your product than your customer is, it's probably because they don't see the value in it. So I think that's a question that if you're seeing a lack of motivation on certain like tasks, it might question, have you done a good job of selling the value of the task?
Yeah. I'm going to go a little macro on this one too, because to me, if people aren't willing to buy into some of the most menial tasks, chances are they're not buying into the larger vision of either who you are or what the company is about. Okay. It's got to be one of those two things. And that's really what it boils down to. That's really it. do they buy into what they're contributing to, and to the larger picture, like what you're about? Are they up to speed on the mission, the vision, and not just the very intellectual task of knowing the mission and vision? Do they buy into what your company is about, where you're going, and what you're creating, or not? right? I mean, if you're not getting the results that you want on some of the smaller tasks, you probably can guarantee that they're not buying into the bigger thing that you think the company's about. The second part of that is, are they buying into you? Right? Sometimes if people don't buy into what the company's about, but they buy into you as a leader, then they will do things for you that they wouldn't normally do, for other companies, in that particular case. So, for me, one of the most important things that leaders need to work on is not just their people, but themselves. Are they investing time? Are you blocking time? Are you making a date with yourself on a daily basis to meditate, work out, make sure you're eating healthy, taking care of, your personal what I call your personal vibration? Are you working on that frequency so that people want to be around you, right? Or are they just waiting until you get fired? Like they may not, they may not do, the dog agrees. They may not do certain things just because they don't really care, right, about your situation and whether you get the CRM filled out or not, because they know you're the only one at the end of the day who's getting held accountable for that. So there's that. Now for on the same token, okay, those of you who are in that employee situation, and you have that CRM or just whatever, menial task that you get to fill. It doesn't matter. Whatever the thing is, that always becomes the sort of the sacred cow that we talk about when it comes to things that people don't want to do. So the next question is like, okay, what are you doing about it? Okay. Can you create a why? Can you create something? And I'll just as an example with that piece of thing, with that documentation in mind, you know what? Like when I'm in the moment with a customer, I am present. I'm in that moment and like, I can't forget anything. 30 seconds after that conversation is over and I move on to the next thing. Do you think I'm with it? Do I remember all the details? No. Right. So the sooner I document that stuff, like now I'm doing it for them. Right. At the end of the day, they don't care about the company or your boss. Okay. If you forgot a detail in the proposal or you didn't deliver on something that you committed to in that situation, then you're the one who's going to be at fault. So if nothing else for me, my own reputation is important enough to go in and want to be paying attention or in some way, shape, or form handling that. So just, you got to find your own personal why as well.
Yep. I think you hit the nail on the head. I muted myself for a minute there. My dog decided that somebody was coming up to the house. So, but he seems to have quieted down now. So I agree. I agree with everything. I think it was interesting what you were saying there about, believing in the leader themselves. Like I'll do a lot of things that I see are really dumb if I trust that the person in charge has a reason for making me do them. Mm-hmm. Right. I may not want to do it. But if I trust, like, they're not going to make me do something just to fill time, right? That there's a larger purpose, mm-hmm. then I'm more willing to. So I think that's a really interesting insight for, I think, leaders to keep in mind is people will do things they don't want to for a leader they trust. So the question is, do they trust you?
But, interesting. Cool.
Good stuff. All right, next one.
Alrighty.
This one I think is huge. All right. If people are not motivated, either yourself or your people who you're managing, I would ask, are they feeling challenged? Boredom really sucks.
Yeah. So this is, I have a very personal story with this because about a year ago when we had got through kind of our January to March are always just kind of a crazy time for us, a lot of travel, a lot of event production, etc. But I was in a conversation with you and you're like, Mark, I'm bored. Like you literally had the foresight to tell me I am not feeling challenged right now. Right. And so kudos to you for actually speaking up, because I probably would have gone another month before I thought anything of it. Just being honest, like I talk about a lot of this stuff. I know a lot of this stuff in theory. I am by no means perfect, you guys, what this looks like. But that was a conversation where I said, oh, okay, well, all right, let me think about some things, because I know we have stuff. I know we're always innovating and coming up with new things to do and thinking about where does the company go next and all that stuff. And that picture is even different today than it was a year ago. So we always have more things, right? It's just a matter of, I get to step up as a leader and lead and help people see, oh, well, what else is possible for them, and how could, what could that look like? So that was a thing that we got to experience firsthand, or at least I did.
Well, and I think it's especially important. I don't know. Like I mentioned this when we kicked off last week's podcast, that the feedback I had gotten was from a manager who felt like his early career folks were just like raring to go, right? Because everything's new. So of course everything is a challenge. So they have things to learn and grow from. But he was really struggling from some of his more experienced folks. And I think that can happen in a lot of places, where as you get farther along in your career, nothing is new, right? You've seen it all, you've done it all, you've overcome it all. And so that's where you get those folks who are, 5 years or less from retirement, who are just on cruise control, right? Because they may feel, whether it's true or not, they may feel as though there's no new challenge. So I think that's where, if you're the manager, how can you open their eyes to a new experience, or a new way to stretch their strengths, or a new way to challenge themselves? And if that's you, like kind of to the example you just used, like speak up. If you're not feeling challenged, either speak up to a manager so that you can kind of brainstorm what else is out there, or just like literally have some self-reflection. Like, what would make me feel as though I was challenged in a good way, right? Sometimes I think we think that being challenged is always bad.
Right.
But to me, being challenged with new experiences is what also keeps things interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with experienced folks, typically right now we're talking about the baby boomer generation. You can try competition. Competitions still work. It's still, friendly rivalries within a group, different things like that. Those are always good ways, certain programs, blitzes, different things that you can get, people to help out with. If you have folks that are more mature and they like sharing, then part of their role could be redefined, or a thing you can challenge them to do or incentivize them to do is to mentor somebody. As long as I'm not a big mentorship guy in like everybody has to do it kind of way, but if there's somebody who really likes mentoring and you can actually create a result with a younger employee, then great. There's some things we can do that way. So
I just, on that note, like, I think there's a lot of people who would like to mentor who don't want to manage, right? Like, we get some people who like have been in a certain job for a long time and who think, man, the only way to move up is to become a manager. But like, you can be a really good mentor and not have to manage. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of different outside the box ways to think. Those are a couple that I would clue people in on right away that I would be using quite a bit with that group. Is there a way where I can earn my way into some a greater deal of flexibility? If I want to, how else can people grow? There's a lot of different things that way, but that is a big one, right? When I don't feel challenged anymore, people start to back off. Now, one of the reasons I usually probably don't feel as challenged, by the way, is like I probably got really good. Or I'm good at this, right? So I've mastered this. And so to go to our model in the Survivor's Guide to Thriving is like, when I'm good, when I'm in momentum in my job, then I want to be paying attention to what's next. Like, what does that next level look like? And that's where I think leaders need to really help out a lot, is catching people when they're doing good. And we have a little conversation that quite frankly, Amanda, we need to do a better job of teaching this in some of our classes going forward. It's been coming up. The appreciate, celebrate, accelerate model. And so you literally sit down in a manager conversation or leadership conversation with somebody like that and say, hey, what are you appreciating about what's going on right now? Right? I want to celebrate your years of service. Like, this is, what you've done, and, your competency at this is amazing. Let me just ask you this. What would it look like to accelerate and go to the next level? Right? I don't think we have that conversation enough. By the way, that conversation is for people of all ages. Anytime they get to a new level, like, you should literally be having that with somebody probably once a week, maybe at least once a month. Like, sit down and say, okay, what does the next level look like? So that's a big one that I think people can benefit from a lot. So appreciate, celebrate, accelerate. What does that next level look like? Don't just get satisfied with what's good. The only way to continue thriving once we get to thriving is to find out what that next level looks like. And it doesn't have to be a new position, doesn't have to be a new job, just getting better at a new skill, honing a new task, just one notch above where you're at.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's challenge. And we're getting close here to the end. So we got two more kind of, again, more reasons in specific situations why people might not be motivated. So number 6, this one, again, I'm going to reference back, but in all of our programs, we talk about the basic human needs. Okay. If you do not know what I'm talking about, jump back in this podcast because we did a whole 6-part series on every single one of them. So you can jump back and listen to those. There's also a blog post. So there's lots of good stuff out there about the 6 basic needs. But the reality is there are certain situations where folks' basic needs might not be being met, and that could lead to a lack of motivation. In particular, I think about things like when a company is downsizing or merging or acquiring, and there's uncertainty about what my future looks like, right? If you know that your company is going to be acquired or you're going to merge with another company, and you don't know if your job's going to exist in 6 months, it's really hard to be motivated to put in a lot of extra effort, right? Or if you don't, another one might be contribution, right? If you don't feel like the work you do is meaningful, like why do it if I don't feel like it's important or I don't feel like it makes a difference? So watch some of those 6 basic needs, because I think those can lead to a motivation break as well.
Yeah. And just for a quick review, I mean, you guys can go listen to the episodes on this later, but here's the 6-second version instead of the 6-hour version if you were to go listen to all the podcasts. So it really starts out with certainty, right? I have to have certainty that I'm safe at work, that my job is going to be there, that things aren't going away, my cheese is not moving, things like that. I also need to experience variety, right? So all human beings have a need for trying new things and, moving up or moving down or moving side, just having change a little bit every now and then. And then we also like to have connection, right? So I need to feel like I belong to something bigger than me. And then to feel significant, to know that what I'm doing is mattering right now, right? So I love to feel significant, feel proud, in other words, every now and then, right? And then we also have contribution, which you mentioned, and then growth. So I want to be contributing to something bigger than me. And then I always need to be expanding, growing my skill sets, growing my mindset, growing my spirituality, whatever the thing is, but growing on a consistent basis. And so Tony Robbins says, and by the way, these are the 6 basic needs according to Tony Robbins, Anthony Robbins, if you want to look him up. But here is, he says that if you're experiencing like at least 3 of these on a regular basis at work, the likelihood that you will be engaged or your employees will be engaged at work is incredibly high, right? So you don't have to complete all of the needs, but if you can help somebody experience at least 3 of those, connection, right? Are you, sitting down, connecting with your employees or creating opportunities for them to connect as a team? Are we doing that, right? This is kind of like what we do. I was just appreciating this morning our team huddle, right? So we try to huddle as regularly as we can. Sometimes it's 2 days a week. Sometimes it's 5. Lately with the busy season, we've been hedging more towards 2, sometimes 1. But we do make a point to connect, right? And then when we're not connecting on the huddle, like we do things like we have a text message group or we Snapchat, and we're not afraid to use a little Bitmoji to express how we're feeling once in a while, right? Because the team is connected and bonded and we feel, we're part of each other. Right now it's March Madness. We're doing the NCAA bracket. Everybody's getting everybody's getting their ass handed to them, but we're doing the bracket, because so those are like little things that help create connection and family and unity and right, that feeling of belonging. Having variety, can I move around? Can I try some different things? I remember it was a really big deal in my family. This is probably going back, 10, 15, maybe more years ago now. My sister had a good job at a company in central Minnesota where she was working in the office, right? It's kind of, clerical secretary type thing, which is what she'd always done. And then suddenly she was no longer happy. She was either going to quit or she needed to go do something else. And so the company found a place for her to move out to the floor and still be in that, kind of clerical role. But now she was in charge of inventory. Now she gets to drive a forklift once in a while. Now she gets to move things around. She doesn't have to sit at a desk, right? And so this is a way to retain a great employee to do that job, but not necessarily be in the same role. And sometimes let's be honest, we take for granted that we think somebody likes to do that job just because they're good at it. And eventually people get bored. And when people get bored, they start searching on the career websites while they're on their break, and maybe even while they're not. So just pay attention.
Well, and I think too, be careful of kind of the unwritten messages that your company culture is sending. Like, I know of companies where people are like, man, I'm kind of bored in the role I'm at, but there's this other role in the company that I'm interested in. But what will people think if I apply for it? What, will they think that I
Yeah.
don't want to work in this department anymore? Will they think that I don't like them? Right. And so, number one, that comes back to some of our own stories and limiting beliefs that we need to deal with. But number two, you might have created unknowingly a culture where people think it's not okay to look for other opportunities within the organization or to move around or whatnot. So be a little careful about that, because, there may be a way to have your basic needs met, but in a different place in the organization.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that hopefully I've made this clear enough within our team, Amanda, but I've said, hey, like, I don't expect any of us, present party included, to do this job forever, right? What I'm trying to create is this is the best possible place for each of us to grow into the next best version of us, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's another job within the company. Maybe it's doing more coaching, less coaching, more leadership, less leadership. I don't know. Maybe become an independent partner within the company or something like that. But this is what I'm trying to create as a personal development company who helps companies grow their people, is that this job is in and of itself a personal development journey. Right. For everybody. So you're becoming, I'm becoming, we're all becoming the next best version of ourselves for whatever life calls us into next. We never know what that's going to be. I don't believe that most people are even lifers, in a job anymore. There are a few, there are some people that love consistency. They want to stay in their community, in their city, whatever. If that job, that opportunity, that company was there for 30, 40 years, they would do it. It's just the reality of the global society is that's probably not going to happen. So what's that going to look like? So a lot of ways, variety, you guys, is really important. One of the other ones that's really easy to create at work, just so I hit on 3 that you can start creating today, is significance. And this, just recognize, honest to God, say thank you once in a while. Like, that's literally all you have to do is say, wow, like that thing you did over there, like I can't get by without you doing that. And that really helps. Or I really appreciate the way you did that, or the timeliness, or whatever it is that you appreciate, because that goes a long way to help people understand that their job is important. And just so a lot of people aren't getting that at home either, right? And so that's a way that you can create a culture and a place at work to help people get something that they're literally getting, that their lives are probably in a lot of ways devoid of. Right. Well, I know lots of moms who slave away all day. They work so hard, just literally not even having a regular job, but being a mom, that's one of the, or stay-at-home dads for that matter, who work all day long, but it's a thankless job. Right. And so helping people find a way to be feel that they have been appreciated, that they are appreciated, is a big one.
Mm-hmm. It's good. It's good. Which brings us to our last and final of what I'm calling these motivation blockers. And we alluded to this one last week. So most of you have probably at some point in time tried either the carrot or stick approach, right? The reward or consequence approach to motivation. Like, if they're not motivated, well, I'll just punish them for it until they are. Or, well, I'll give them a little teaser of a reward until they get motivated.
Right.
What can happen though is if you are seeing people, you're throwing out consequences or you're throwing out rewards and they're still not motivated, there's a very good likelihood that you're pushing the wrong buttons. Okay. Yeah. So, Mark, I think you actually mentioned this last week when we talked, or at least one of these, but, in conversations around motivation, there's 2 types, right? So there's intrinsic and there's extrinsic. So intrinsic motivation is just like things that we are naturally motivated by, right? Maybe they're things we're interested in or things that allow us to use our strengths, but it just comes from within. Whereas extrinsic is where we're motivated by something else, either a reward or a consequence. But what can happen is if you use the wrong one of those with certain people, you will actually see a decline in motivation. So if you've got somebody who, they're just intrinsically, naturally motivated by things, because they're interested or because they're using their strengths, and you try and use extrinsic rewards or consequences like bonuses or vacations, like Mark, you mentioned last week, like there's some younger folks who are not driven by the rewards trip, or they're not driven by the bonus. That's probably because they're intrinsically motivated, maybe just by the work they do. And so if you try and tempt them too much, instead of just like playing on the fact that they're naturally motivated by something, it's funny. I actually found that there's some research out there that will say if you use too many extrinsic motivators when they're intrinsically motivated, people will actually do less.
Yeah. This legitimately happened in a call last week where the frustration, from manager to employees was, we pay them. Like we have high paid professionals working for us. I just expect them to show up and do their job. Like if you're still on at the end of this right now, for the 4 of you that are still watching on the Facebook Live, like hit me with some angry faces. Like I want angry faces on this one. Okay. Just please hit the angry face on the button on your Facebook. I legitimately do, because this comes up a lot is, hey, I'm paying them to do a job. I expect them to show up. What's kind of funny is like with certain things, the angry faces just came across. I love it. It's perfect. So what with certain things, demand will always respond to the supply, right? It was certain things, demand will always respond to the supply, money being one of them. If you give let's just say, even if you're an intrinsically motivated person and you're getting paid too much to do the job that you do, right? And that's legit. Some people are getting paid way too much to do the job they do because we think if I just pay them more, then they'll do the job better, they'll work harder, they'll appreciate me more, they'll worship me more as a leader, whatever. And the reality is, like, that's not true. Like, you picked the wrong thing to motivate somebody with. But if you try to take that money away, no, somebody's built their life on that dollar amount. Now that is their expectation. That is now an expectation, right? So, we think about it this way. When we teach how to position the value of your products in the marketplace, I want you to think about it like this way. So we teach this around, your products and services that people sell, but you can think about it this way from a leadership perspective. There are 4 different types of relationships. You can have a transactional relationship, which is where you give me money and I do something for you, right? Or I give you a product or service. This is how you buy gas. You always go to the gas station that's 2 cents cheaper, or maybe that has whatever, bigger sodas, whatever you choose. We have what we call expected value. This is basically what I expect to get or give in return for something, right? And then we have what we call value add. And this is where we think these are the benefits, right? Like your benefits are your 401k, your HR package, okay, whatever's in there, okay. All companies have them. Like, any company, as I've been finding out, because we need to create one, and we're working on that. Any company can create one of those, okay. You don't even have to have a lot of people or money. Like anybody can create those things. And so you have your value added things. This is things like maybe unlimited PTO. That's a new thing that's been coming up a lot, right? We find that people actually take less vacation when they have unlimited PTO, which is interesting. You can have other benefits, financial benefits, investment opportunities, equity exchange, stock ownership, right? There's lots of different ways to incentivize people without having to necessarily spend money right off the bat. It's not always the case. And then finally, the last way, or the what we consider to be the best way to create value with people in any situation, is partnership, right? So are we in partnership together to create a thing or not? And if we're not, then we have a problem, right? So are we in partnership to create this? And that's, when it's a company and employee thing, like, we're creating each other's lifestyles, right? I depend on you, you depend on me. That's how we operate. And when we operate from a place of like, you need me, I don't need you, you'll always, always, always be expected or transactional. And your people will treat you like a transaction. So the faster you can get in touch with somebody's intrinsic motivators or extrinsic motivators, and understand like what really motivates them. Some people legitimately are money motivated to an extent, right? I mean, some people will work for more money. It's just a very small percentage of your population. And typically it's also the easiest thing for you to do from a leadership position is to ask for more money, offer more money, something like that. What takes time and work is like literally sitting down and getting to know, okay, what's important to Wade, what's important to Amanda, what's important to John. I know money's a part of it, but what about flexibility? How much do you appreciate that? What about working from home? What about that, right? Like, what are the other things, right? It's always money and, right? That's what we say in sales training. I know dollars are important, but what else is too? Because it's always money and it's never just money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you think it's just money, the and will show up later.
It will come and punch you in the jaw is what it will do.
Yeah. I was going to say in sales situations where people are like, oh, I just want the lowest price. Don't worry. The and will show up later if you give them the lowest price.
That's right.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. So find the right button to push for each individual. Don't just try and do blanket approaches. They rarely work. So
absolutely. So
all right, so
we've put a lot of work in here today, man.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of content.
I need a stretch episode. After all of that, man.
Yes. I ran out of coffee. I'm nearly out of water. Guys, I just really appreciate you sticking around and paying attention for this long and tuning in to this episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the stuff that we're seeing out here in the corporate workspace, this is real stuff. This is no BS. I mean, this is these are people's lives. And this isn't just numbers. It's not just people on a spreadsheet. Literally getting to know, the depth of what really motivates somebody is important. And I get that that's more work. My hope is over time through our work and the work of others that organizations will wake up to a whole new level of depth of what leadership ought to look like. And I know that that's evolving in society right now. It's just slow. So this is where if you're the employee who's listening to this, this is where you listen to this and realize like there's the way that you've been led or the way you've been leading doesn't have to be the way because what you're doing is based off of a lifetime of what you've seen. And that may have been what I call unenlightened. Okay. So I'm out here really passionate about waking up a new generation of enlightened leaders who get it, who get people, who care about people, who want to take their organizations to the next level. And so guys, if that's you, if this is something that has resonated with you about this so far, we need to chat. Like we just need to talk. Like seriously, reach out, if it's, maybe just one person on your team who you'd love to invest in to help them level up because that would be meaningful to them. Maybe you have a team. Even better. That's great too. Just know that we would love to be talking with you or those people in your company who need to hear this message because we're looking to, through the work that we're doing at MJST is really about waking up corporate America, waking up corporate world for that matter, to help people experience work in a way that doesn't have to suck. Like what if 10 years from now we all woke up in a society where we had jobs where I didn't dread going in on Monday, right? My take on it is this. You get one chance to walk around this planet wearing the suit of you right now. Why spend your day surviving your work? Why spend your day surviving in the leadership of your team? Why spend your time like just getting through when there's so much more available? And if you're a leader, an employer, a division something or other, a VP, a CEO listening to this podcast, I think you have a moral obligation to create an organization that is enlightened, that helps people become the best version of themselves. And when you do that, they're going to show up for you and they will produce even more than you ever thought was possible. Mic drop. I'm done, Amanda.
Oh man, that's good stuff. Yeah. I can't follow that. The only last thought I had is just in any area of life, if you are asking yourself, how do I fix this? And you haven't yet asked yourself why it is the way it is in the first place, you have missed a step. So on your path to enlightenment, the summary is stop asking how and start asking why, and you will get yourself a lot further. I'm done. I can't follow that. You mic dropped on me.
All right, guys. So we're going to bring this one in for a landing. My friends, if you will, head on over to markjeweltraining.com. The guide that Amanda and I used to produce this podcast for you today is over at markjeweltraining.com. You can head on over to the website and opt in to download the written version, which has more resources. It's got links out to other blog posts, not even just our blog posts, like other people's resources where we got some of this stuff from. So it's a very good document. I mean, it's literally about 20 pages of just really good content that will help you get in touch with how to motivate people better. And think of this podcast here today or this live stream on Facebook is simply a supplement to what's in the book. So please pop on over to markjeweltraining.com and get a copy of that in your email inbox. Also, other cool resources over there too. We've got a ton of great stuff. Amanda does a great job of creating PDFs and downloads. We've got audio, video, PDF kind of stuff over there. Blog posts. We've got all of our favorite books from everybody in the company. Everything. Lots of cool stuff over there. A ton of resources at markjeweltraining.com. The Jewel has 2 L's, by the way. So if you get something else, that means you missed an L, and or you spelled training wrong, which is perfectly legitimate. Just try again. So with that, you guys, thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in with us here today. We very, very, very much appreciate it. Everything else is just surviving, my friends. It's your time to thrive today. Let's go get it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in this episode by heading over to markjeweltraining.com/podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That's what helps us move up in the charts so that more people can find us and start their surviving to thriving journey. See you next week.